International Women's Day today, so it seems like a really good day to get together as a bunch of knowledgeable women in various countries in Latin America who are as worried as we are in Europe about the contagion of NATO. Now, the original purpose of NATO was to jointly defend against the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union was uh, um, disintegrated. NATO should have been abolished, but it wasn't. Instead, it has attempted to carve out a new role for itself by trying to bring other countries into the fold with the same nuclear arms potential. But instead, it seems to exist by just being there to confront the threats it is caused by its own continuing existence, as in Ukraine. So the inclusion of a Latin American country in NATO could alter global security dynamics quite drastically, especially concerning countries such as Russia and China, who have interests in Latin America. So we could start off even more tensions in an already tense geopolitical world. Well, today, from Mexico, from Venezuela, from Nicaragua, we have some speakers who will now tell us how this is affecting them. And just a little bit about GWAN, the Global Women for Peace, United Against NATO. We are women from across the world. We put on webinars in various sectors of the physical world, all relating to NATO. And our objective really is to gather together and diminish, if not abolish, NATO and all it stands for. Now, my co-presenter today is Ellen Mass. Ellen recently went to Mexico and discovered Alicia and the Bien Star program, where women aged 60 to 65 are receiving additional benefits for years of housework and raising children. How about that? Ellen, would you like to say a few words before I move into our first speaker?
Yes, just a few words. Thank you so much. I was in Venezuela in 23 with the homage to Hugo Chavez and Caracas with the great celebrations, and 11 presidents were there to talk to us about imperialism and what they suffer and how they continue to stand up for the rights of sovereignty of their countries. So this what we're seeing, I think, in my opinion, is the continuation of the Bolivarian movement, which was started by Simon Bolivar. I'm going to put some of this in the chat as we move along so you can see these things. But this is back in 1819. But so this is continuing today in the form of a European military alliance, NATO. And this is seen very, very obviously with U.S. Southern Command right off Venezuela's coast. But if we can face these things without denial, these things can be defeated. The rise of militarism can be defeated, I think, because dogmatic aggression is something we educate our children and our populations against. But unfortunately, these lessons we learn about colonialism, imperialism are not taking root, particularly north of the Mexican border. So last month when I was in Mexico, I was very, very inspired, impressed, overwhelmed with the Benistar program that Pippa just mentioned, and that is really transforming the country into the fourth, what they call the fourth transformation, which Alicia will tell us a little bit about. And people don't even know about it here. I think here, when I say here, I'm talking North America. I don't even think most people the Mexico is North America. It's not South America. Uh, so this Benistar program, I think, is very universal in that it connects to Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, that they are investing their time, money, and culture in human population improvements. So that is what I wanted to say about all three countries I'm talking with today. And I'm just so pleased to be here and have UNAC, the sponsor, promoting this, because they have been so much of a anti-imperialist front in the United States and beyond. And the Global Women United Against NATO that Pippa mentioned, I'm also with that. And I'm also with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And so I try to do as much as I can, and I'm waiting to hear everybody speak now.
Thank you, Ellen. Well, our first speaker is Flavia Marquez Silva. She is a former Venezuelan diplomat and the executive director for the International Summit for Anti-Imperialist Africans and Afro-Descendants. She's part of the Free Alexandre Committee as well. Flavia, we are really looking forward to hearing from you. Please unmute and please carry on.
Hello, Pippa. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here today with all of you. Thank you for inviting me, for considering me. It's an honor for me. Also with my colleagues from Venezuela and Nicaragua. Amazing day, happy day for all the women that are today among our listeners and the women present here today. Well, this subject caught my eye as soon as Pippa invited me. I consider it was a great opportunity to share with you part of the vision that Venezuela have shared regarding the NATO. And why is the real interest? Trying to tell you about what is the real interest of NATO in Latin America, which has been growing in recent years, as you know, particularly through partnerships with countries like Colombia, which became NATO's first Latin American global partner in 2018. You all know we are a border country with Colombia. We're close countries that have their ons and lows, we could say, ups and lows. But these situations signal a broader strategic interest in expanded security cooperation beyond the traditional, as you mentioned, European and North American allies. So they said that is obviously trying to counter in China and Russia presence in the region, the outreach in Latin America, trying to limit the growing influence of China and Russia in the region, who have strengthened economic, military, and diplomatic ties with Latin American countries, not only maybe Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, but with all of us. Also, they are this represents the vision of the US. As you know, the United States, which is the NATO's most powerful member, if you want, has historically viewed Latin America through the Monroe Doctrine lens, seeking to limit external powers' influence in the region. So they could say it's also this. In the case of Venezuela, Venezuela has been one of the most vocal opponents of NATO influence in Latin America. This position, of course, is aligned with our broader foreign policy. As you know, it prioritizes sovereignty, anti-imperialism, and multipolar global alliances. And we oppose NATO as an extension of the US imperialism, of course, since, or particularly under our belated President Hugo Chavez and our President Nicolás Maduro, we have denounced that NATO is a tool of US and Western dominance. And of course, the expansion into Latin America is a direct threat to regional sovereignty and a continuation of interventionist policies that had historically shaped the region. As one of you mentioned at the beginning, when the Soviet era, we saw all the effect this had on the Latin American countries. And it is like kind of a neo-colonialism, neo-imperialism undercover by a lot of excuses, if you want. President Maduro has explicitly condemned the actions of NATO regarding military interventions in the Middle East, of course, and Eastern Europe. And in Venezuela, since President Chavez, our leaders often cite the role that NATO played in Libya back in 2011 as an example of Western-backed regime change efforts that they believe, like we believe, they will be trying somewhere or somehow to replicate in Latin America. As you all may know, in the case of Venezuela, we have strong alliances with Russia and China. Maybe it started, and I could say this because I work at the embassy, these so-called sanctions, we call it unilateral coercive measures imposed by the US and Europe. We started to getting close to Russia and China because of this. But at the end, it was also because these were countries that worked with us by respecting our sovereignty and working in not only military, but also economic areas in our country. From Russia, we have purchased military equipment, fighter jets. We have been working toward BRICS recently. And also China, the engagement has been more economic, provided training, provided support in agriculture, social, in housing. So Venezuela has focused in this alliance outside the region, and also our regional security preferences always are toward the ALBA, which is the Latin American alternative, Bolivarian alternative for Latin American countries, and also CELAC instead of NATO. We have all treaties. I don't think I will go that far in history, like the TR, which is the reciprocate security agreement between the Americas. But this also was used by the US back in 2019 and before through the OEAs against Venezuela, trying to get us under one of the chapters because of this situation we have where they recognize the puppet government, if you want. We call it the Wikipedia government of Juan Guaido. And they were trying to get all the other countries to rally them against Venezuela and trying to apply these so-called reciprocal security treatment, the TR. So for Venezuela, NATO is not something we can get close to. We are building a revolution, and Ellen just mentioned, and she was a witness when she was here in 2023. Right now we are, and I will be closing to leave the floor for the rest of my colleagues. We are in this moment getting ready for elections. Once again, as you know, we have 24 years revolution and more than 22 elections. We're going to have National Assembly elections and also regional elections. And at the same time, our people is organizing, and I will talk from the point of view of the Afro-descendants, we're organizing to get a constitutional reform called by the president, is convoking all the sectors, social and economical sectors, to make proposals. In the case of the Afro-descendants, we're rooting for being recognized in the Constitution. And also we are rooting from the movement Somos Venezuela, which I am part to, from this movement, the National Coordinator for Afro-Venezuelans there. We are rooting for having our circumscriptions, or it will be, in the United States, you will call it I forgot the name. So we can have circumscriptions with the majority of population of Afro-descendants recognized, so we can get more congresswomen and congressmen elected for the National Assembly. And well, I will leave it to there. I hope I can be here for the Q&A section, and I want to give you to express how grateful I am to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fabia. That was really interesting. And I love your tone of phrase, the Wikipedia government of Guangdong. Well, love it, absolutely. But also interesting to see that you're looking for constitutional changes. Since you mentioned the question and answers session, which we will be having at the end, please could attendees put your questions in the Q&A section of this Zoom webinar. It is at the bottom of your screen towards the right-hand side. It says Q&A, and we will take questions from there at the end of the program. So thank you so much, Fabia. And next up, we have Andreina Chavez. Andreina is a political journalist who works with the Venezuelan anti-imperialist outlet Venezuela Analysis, and she collaborates with the alternative community at Utopics. Andreina, lovely to have you with us today. Please carry on.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me. And it really is a privilege to be able to listen to so many wonderful speakers, especially women in Latin America who I know are in the front lines of fighting anti-imperialism, fighting capitalism. And as we all know, Women's Day is truly about being anti-fascist, anti-capitalist, and anti-imperialist. So this is quite the perfect event to celebrate this day. And I also think it's wonderful that we get the chance to put the spotlight on an issue that I think gets often overlooked, which is NATO's increasing presence in Latin America and the threat that this poses to Latin America's peace and sovereignty and stability. So as we all know, Latin America is no stranger when it comes to US political intervention, US military interventions. We have lived through almost every possible imagined scenario that the United States has created regarding its abusive foreign policy. Fresh from memory, we can still remember the invasion of Panama in 1989. And even though the United States tries to sell this invasion as some sort of successful event that restored democracy, in reality, this was a clear and terrible violation of Panama's sovereignty, not to mention the thousands of unaccounted deaths that this invasion left in Panama. And of course, we still remember the atrocities of the far-right dictatorships that governed Latin America for many years, the Condor operation, that was only possible because it had the political and the financial backing of the United States. And we still suffer from these events that happened some 50 years ago, but we still are suffering from many lost lives, many progressive political movements that were suppressed during that time. And so living in Venezuela and being able to live under the Bolivarian Revolution is quite an achievement. It's quite something wonderful because after all the history that Latin America has been through, it is amazing that the Bolivarian Revolution has made it so far. It is in 25 years and we're still standing. And we all know that the United States hasn't really left Venezuela alone during these 25 years. They have tried everything from coup d'etats to political meddling, diplomatic isolation. They even tried to impose a puppet government led by Juan Guaido, which Fabia very insightfully called a Wikipedia government. But also the most terrible tool, the most terrible coercion tool that the United States has imposed against Venezuela to try to overthrow the government has been what we call unilateral coercive measures, which is better known as sanctions. So, and I wanted to begin by talking specifically about economic sanctions imposed by the United States and its European allies against Venezuela, because we need to remember that sanctions are just as lethal as a military intervention, and they are far easier to implement, and the consequences a lot difficult to really measure, to really understand. And this is why sanctions are often described as a war without bombs, because you cannot really see these bombs, these bullets that are hitting you, but they are hitting you and they are killing people. It is also crucial to remember that US sanctions are completely illegal. They go against international law, they go against human rights, and basically sanctions are political instruments aimed at inflicting pain and suffering on civilian populations to coerce them to overthrow their own governments and surrender their sovereignty. And we also need to remember that just today, on March 8, 2015, 10 years ago, President Barack Obama labeled Venezuela an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. This declaration was intended to first intimidate international investors, so Venezuela would become toxic for companies and other countries that wanted to invest and do business with Venezuela. And second, this Obama decree was able to set the stage for the extensive sanctions program that was later imposed by President Donald Trump in 2017. The assault against Venezuela has particularly targeted the country's primary source of income, which is the oil industry. In 2017, the US Treasury Department imposed financial sanctions on Venezuela's state-owned company PDVSA, followed by an export embargo in 2019. More importantly, starvation became a key element of US foreign policy, as Washington targeted food imports against Venezuela, and they also terminated swap deals, which Venezuela used to exchange oil for food and medicine. As a result of all of this, widespread food insecurity impacted the most vulnerable sectors of Venezuelan society, alongside shortages of medicine and fuel, and the deterioration of basic public services. US sanctions, as I said, they act as invisible bombs, contributing to the death of thousands of Venezuelans to this day. Despite all this, nowadays we are seeing a very troubling narrative from mainstream media. They are trying to present the idea that sanctions have been ineffective because Nicolas Maduro is still in power and because the Bolivarian revolution is still going on, is more stronger than ever, and is also evolving. We're seeing that the Bolivarian revolution right now is becoming even more popular, is strengthening popular democracy. We're seeing it with communes, with all of these popular organizations that are taking more political power. So mainstream media is now promoting the idea that sanctions have been ineffective, despite the fact that they killed thousands of Venezuelan people. And they are trying to promote the idea that the next logical step for the United States, specifically for the Trump government, will be a military intervention. In fact, I don't know if many of you read the New York Times. I do it sometimes. And they published an article in January that it was titled "Depose Maduro." It was authored by Brett Stevens. In this article, he basically makes the case for deposing the Maduro government either by coercive diplomacy or by force. He even says that a military intervention in Venezuela, it is practically a moral right for the Trump government, which is like saying that killing people is some sort of moral right for the United States. It is absolutely insane. But this is the narrative that mainstream media is promoting right now. So I don't think we should overlook that. We need to remember that during his first term, Donald Trump threatened to keep all options on the table for Venezuela. Additionally, we need to remember that in 2023, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, he revealed that the United States had considered invading Venezuela through Colombia. We don't know exactly the circumstances of the situation. Petro didn't reveal the entire situation, what was going on, but we do know that Venezuela had some invasion attempts during that time, during the first Trump administration. We need to remember that in 2019, in February 2019, the far-right Colombian government led by Juan Manuel Santos and alongside other regional governments from the right wing, they tried to stage a humanitarian intervention in Venezuela through the Colombian border. And I don't know if any of you remember this. This event is remembered in Venezuela as the Battle of the Bridges, because the Venezuelan people, alongside with the Venezuelan army, they stopped the entry of these so-called humanitarian trucks who later we found out they have no humanitarian help. They only had some sort of weapons and things to create violence in Venezuela. So we stopped this attempt at invasion. And then a year later, in 2020, we also stopped a mercenary invasion attempt. I don't know if you remember this, but 2 US Marines tried to enter Venezuela by boat alongside some ex-military Venezuelan army, and they failed. The Venezuelan people managed to stop them, and many of these people were incarcerated. And this invasion attempt was planned in Colombia with the help of the Colombian government led by Juan Manuel Santos before Gustavo Petro took power. So we have had all of these invasion attempts in Venezuela. So I don't think that we need to, I don't think it's possible to dismiss the threat of military invasion in Venezuela, especially if we remember that Colombia is a NATO partner since 2017. And that means that the Colombian army has received support and training from the US Army. This partnership, of course, it took place during the Juan Manuel Santos government. So you will argue that it is possible for the current Colombian government of Gustavo Petro to end this NATO partnership. But we also know that this will probably be met with US resistance and aggression. So that's why I think that in order to really end NATO presence in Latin America, what we need is a broad people-led coalition that truly expels NATO's presence from the region and cut off all of its tentacles. Because I don't think that governments alone will be able to do it. It is also important to remember that the Colombia-NATO partnership exacerbates an already troubling situation, which is the presence of several hundred of US military personnel in Colombian bases since the 1990s, allegedly to combat drug trafficking. Ironically, since the presence of US military in Colombia, drug issues in the region in Colombia have only become much worse. So you can really doubt that that was really the mission. So basically, Colombia continues to be a threat for Venezuela because the US has tentacles in Colombia and is able to destabilize Venezuela through Colombia. We also need to remember that currently Argentina is being ruled by a far-right president, Javier Milei, who has said many times that he is interested in establishing a partnership with NATO. We also need to remember that both Argentina and Ecuador have US military presence in their countries. And even if the numbers are small, they still possess a threat to Latin America and to peace in the region. As Flavia was saying, the Venezuelan government has been very vocal about rejecting the presence of the US military and NATO in the region because they view their actions as a violation of regional agreements to promote peace and sovereignty. A nation's expansion in Latin America, it reminds us that Venezuela continues to be under threat. And we also need to remember that the NATO presence in the region is part of a broader strategy. The US Southern Command has openly expressed interest in controlling and exploiting natural resources.
Oh, Andreina, you seem to have frozen. Well, I think you were coming towards the end anyway. I'm so sorry.
Of the US
Oh, you're coming back. I'm just saying you froze for a while. I think you're pretty much at the end of your presentation now anyway. Is
Yes.
there anything you'd like to say to round up at the end?
Sure, I just want to say that I think basically what we need to do right now is remember that it's not just NATO. We need to reject US Southern Command. We need to reject NATO. We need to reject the presence of all of US military presence in Latin America. These are crucial steps to safeguarding people's lives, to protecting natural resources, and to assert our sovereignty as nations unwilling to submit to US interests. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andreina. Really, thank you a lot. That was very informative. I remember all too well those trucks coming across with these so-called humanitarian aid. Shocking. Absolutely. It's almost laughable, but it's serious. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And now I'll just remind you that we are putting our questions in the Q&A box, which if you click on at the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A, please put your question there and we'll see to it later. Next up is Colleen Littlejohn. Colleen is speaking to us from Nicaragua. She is a retired development economist who has worked for Catholic Relief Services, Save the Children Canada, and the World Bank in Colombia, Chile, Nicaragua, and in Liberia, West Africa. Nicaragua has been her home since early 1980. So glad to have you with us, Colleen. You're muted at the moment, so it'd be grateful if you'd unmute. And the floor is yours.
Oh, got it. I'm not the most technical person in the world. But anyway, I would first like to thank people for inviting me to participate in this discussion. I've had the very good fortune to live in Nicaragua for most of the last 45 years. I'm a Nicaraguan citizen. Before coming here, I lived in Chile, where I'd been working for CRS also, that US government, or not, well, a development agency. I was actually born in northern New York in a small town on the Canadian border. My father was son of Canadian immigrants, joined the army during the Korean War, stationed in Southwest England, so where he met my mother, and they came back to the States, and I was born. Like the majority of children in the United States, I was raised to believe in America, the beautiful land of the free, fighting wars in Korea and Vietnam to defend democracy, hiding under school desks to defend ourselves against the possibility that Russia would use nuclear bombs during the Cuban Missile Crisis. But my eyes were opened in my junior year of college when I studied a semester at the College of Europe in Bruges, Belgium. And a Spanish friend of mine brought me to see a documentary on the September 11th coup in Chile. And I couldn't believe that my country had planned and supported such an atrocity. And I decided that I would go to Chile to see, and I did. I did go. I went with CRS, Catholic Relief Services, and they had to get me out of there though, since after a few, about a year there, I refused to renew an AID food project for concentration camps. So they got me out of there quickly. But something similar actually happened here in Nicaragua when I came again in the early 80s. I refused to sign a small project with USAID because they had changed the wording of the project to support training of community health promoters and then to promote community youth civic programs promoters, basically the shades of what happened here in 2018. Then CRS wanted to get me to go to Africa, but I just stayed in Nicaragua. Over the years, I never realized that NATO was becoming a direct threat to Nicaragua and Latin America in general. Though when I learned about Colombia and had opened their doors to NATO, it was disturbing. But researching for this presentation has again been a moment of opening my eyes. Nicaragua has resisted US and US-funded interventions for over 150 years, starting with the overthrow of William Walker, driven by the doctrine of manifest destiny. He came here in Nicaragua in 1855 as a leader of as a leader of a mercenary army and declared himself president in July 1856, an act officially supported by the US President Franklin Pierce, though less than a year later, he was forced to resign by a Central American military coalition. He tried again in 1860, but was captured and executed in Honduras. The US then militarily occupied Nicaragua between 1927 and 1933 when Augusto Cesar Sandino led the rebellion which forced the United States to withdraw its troops from Nicaragua. Sandino, who has become a symbol of resistance to US imperialism, was then betrayed and executed in 1934 by the National Guard forces of General Somoza, whose family dynasty ruled Nicaragua for more than 40 years with the support of the US. And I just lost my document. I'll get it back. Here it goes. Over the years, so almost immediately after the triumph of the revolution, the United States began to organize and finance the Contras, using Honduras as a training and operations center. US troops, Navy SEALs, also directly attacked the major port of the country. Nicaragua took the case to the International Court of Justice in 1984 and won the case in 1986. But the US withdrew from the International Court of Justice and has never compensated Nicaragua for the damages. The cost of the 10 years of aggression in the 80s in terms of lives lost and physical destruction is impossible to calculate. More recently, the United States has used NATO to strengthen an aggressive expansion plan in Latin America, according to an article in March 2023 in the Black Agenda Report, which is produced by the US-based Black Alliance for Peace. The article was written by Sergio Rodriguez Gelbestein, who served as the Director of International Affairs of the Presidency of Venezuela. He states that at the end of 2022, the US has installed 12 military bases in Panama, 12 in Puerto Rico, 9 in Colombia, 8 in Peru, 3 in Honduras, 2 in Paraguay, and as well as the installation of this type of bases in Aruba, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guantanamo in Cuba, and Peru. In Argentina, territorial waters in the Malvinas Islands, usurped by the UK, there is a NATO presence there formed by bases on several islands which guard the entire Atlantic from the north to the Antarctic area, trying to form a strategic triangle of control of the southern tip of South America. Nuclear submarines are operating in the area, and France and the US regularly organize joint military maneuvers in the region. The US strategy is aimed at strengthening its presence there because its proximity to Antarctica and the Amazon, the planet's main reserves of oxygen and biodiversity, and close to the world's largest freshwater reserve. His article also states that the US is attempting to reinstate the Cold War in the region, this time against China and Russia, by urging 6 Latin American countries they were urging 6 Latin American countries to donate their Russian military equipment to Ukraine. Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela were not included in this request, obviously. Laura Richardson, the head of the US Armed Forces Southern Command, warned that after China, Russia is the #2 adversary in the region. The US is especially interested in Latin America because of its natural resources, including 60% of the world's reserves of lithium and the large reserves of oil in Guyana and Venezuela. The Black Alliance for Peace is now organizing a US-NATO Out of the Americas network, which will carry forward the Zone of Peace campaign. One of the core objectives of the Zone of Peace, consisting of organizations and individuals throughout the Americas, is to make our Americas a zone of peace by opposing the structures that prevent peace, like the US-NATO militarization in our region. It is an effort to activate the popular movements in the Americas in support of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, which in 2014 called to make America's region a zone of peace. One goal of this network is to develop public education, advocacy, grassroots campaigns, social media campaigns, and other activities in an effort to create avenues for communication to connect organizations and individuals in areas where imperialist violence is most intense, for example, in Haiti. Another goal is to build deeper coordination among anti-imperialist organizations, political parties, labor, and social justice organizations and movements with the Americas. But as the saying goes, and I'll just conclude on this, el pueblo unido jamás será vencido. The people united will never be defeated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colleen. And for the historical background as well there, because you know, very many of the people listening in today will not be from the region, and I already see in the chat someone from Hungary saying how eye-opening this entire webinar is for them, and that's one of the reasons we do these things. And so anyone who's listening, please sign up for our newsletter on our webpage, which is www.womenagainstnato.org. I'll put it in the chat later. Well, next, our last speaker is Alicia Angley, and I'm asking Ellen to introduce her.
Okay. I met Alicia in Campeche, Mexico, which is a wonderful tourist town and a wonderful state in Mexico as well as a city. And I was in the city, and we even had an interview with someone from her program that talked to us about the specifics. He had just been to do, as Pippa had mentioned, which was the women's awards, their subsidies for doing housework, 60 to 65 years old. And he had just come back from distributing cards to the people. Now, Alicia is currently part of the Substantive Equity Unit, which is an institutional office dedicated to promoting and ensuring substantive equality, which goes beyond formal equality. That means treating everyone the same, to address structural inequalities and barriers that prevent the marginalized groups from effective access to rights and opportunities. They work on policies, programs, and actions that reduce discrimination, promote inclusion, and ensure fair outcomes for all individuals they work with, considering their different starting points and their different circumstances. So I'm so glad to see. The last time I saw Alicia was in Campeche, so I'm glad she's here with us.
Hello, thanks, Helen, for the introduction. I want to start by saying that this is the first time I do something like this. I'm not, and also excuse my English, I'm not as fluent as all of you guys. And I'm going to be completely honest. I am not as well informed when it comes to NATO, which in Mexico, to be honest, we don't really hear about the organization almost at all. But I have do my research, and I can say that Mexico has always historically been a country of neutrality. We have always been autonomous, and we have always focused on our own programs, inside programs that we have our fair share of problems, I mean. And we currently are progressing into being a more not, I wouldn't say powerful country, but into a bit more anti-corruption country. We have a lot of things to deal with, and the intervention of the militarization into the country, I don't think it's a good idea at all. Not even on Latin America. Ellen told me that I can speak more about what I do in Mexico, and I think that's what I'm going to focus more, because I don't want to speak about things I'm not sure about. So I'm going to read what I wrote, because I don't want to, get all over the place. So I am Alicia, I'm 29, I'm 30 years old, and I have worked on the Ministry of Welfare in Campeche for almost 10 years. In that secretary, we do social programs for the people with little and with the most vulnerable people. And my most enjoyable experiences have been the fact that you realize most of the time what people really want is to be heard. It's not about the money or the financial help you can give to them. Most of the people what actually want is to be heard. And as Ellen said, I'm currently part of the Substantive Equality Office, which we mostly do training workshops to promote inclusion and ensure fair outcomes in all areas of public service. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. This is my first time doing it, and I'm so really, really, really nervous.
Don't worry, take your time. Don't worry, just take your time.
It's
And
very-
we're all really interested.
It
Thank
is.
you. Yes, and I wanted to also speak about what currently in Mexico it's like the most talk about topic, which is we have right now what we call the most powerful woman in the world, which is our president Claudia Sheinbaum. She is all the people here in Mexico are really, really proud of her at the moment because of her actions against the tariffs that Donald Trump wanted to impose in our country. Thankfully, she managed to reach an agreement with him through a phone conversation, and they are and she also called to a meeting in the Zocalo in the city center in Mexico City tomorrow at 12 p.m. in which she's going to tell the people of Mexico which actions to take in order to stop these tariffs to be imposed in about a month, and also about celebration. And we are really proud of her because this is the first time Mexico has a president that we can really be, that we can say she is prepared to do the job. She's always the first Mexican woman to be a president, and she is the first Mexican president that we can say is really prepared to do the job. Ellen always asked me when we met in Campeche about what about the Morena party and how it got there, and I actually have a lot of information about it, but I don't know how to say it. I think I will be better if you ask me questions because I'm honestly really nervous and all over the place.
Okay, not to worry. We can move on to the questions now anyway.
Yes,
Thank
please.
you very, very much, Alicia. We appreciate this is your first presentation, and you were very good. Okay,
Yeah,
so yeah, you've got the experience now.
thank you.
Now, I was just looking in the question section, and the first one that came up actually concerns Andreina. When you froze, when your screen froze, you were actually about to talk about the most important cause of war, and the endless thirst for capitalist resources. So maybe, Andreina, you would like to enlarge on that.
Hi. So yes, I think
We'll give it a couple of moments, but you've frozen up again, unfortunately. This Andreina, I think we can't hear you at all. Maybe you would like to switch off your video and
it's not
just
just NATO that is actually going through.
all right, let's try again.
Sorry, it's just that my internet is sort of failing right now. I will try to be really quick. So what I was saying earlier is that besides NATO being in Latin America and representing a threat to peace and stability in the region, we also have the U.S. Southern Command present in Latin America, and we have the Laura Richardson, the commander of the U.S. Southern Command, has said repeatedly that they are interested in controlling and exploiting natural resources in Latin America. She has specifically said that they're interested in controlling the oil resource in Venezuela, which we know are the largest oil resource on the planet. They have also said about exploiting lithium in Argentina, Chile, Bolivia. And she has also mentioned all the vast resources that are in the Amazon region. So when we are talking about threats in Latin America, it's not just NATO, it's also the U.S. Southern Command. It is also the fact that they are trying to exploit natural resources in the region. So this is not just a fight against military presence, it is an anti-capitalist fight. It is a fight to preserve our planet. It is a fight to preserve the lives of indigenous people who live in these regions. So yeah, I think that was what I was saying about. I also need to remind people that the U.S. Army Command has, in the last few years, has begun strengthening military alliances with countries like Guyana and Suriname. And I think this is something that is often overlooked, but it's really quite important because Guyana and Suriname are neighboring countries with Venezuela, and they have been involved in these military duties, military exercises near Venezuela, and this constitutes a threat for Venezuela, for its sovereignty and for the peace in the region. And this is something that the Venezuelan government has been denouncing repeatedly over the years. And so when we talk about getting rid of NATO in Latin America, we talk about NATO, but also every tentacle of the U.S. military that is in Latin America, including the U.S. Southern Command and including all of these military bases that are in Colombia, Ecuador, Argentina, and so many other countries. They try to sell this presence as something that is contributing to security in the region, but we know that that's not the case. Because as we have seen in Colombia, the presence of the U.S. military has only created more issues, more conflict, not to mention the incredible amount of human rights violations that the U.S. military has been involved in Colombia. It is not really talked about a lot, but people who live in Venezuela and who live in Colombia know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I think that's more or less what I was going to say when I froze before.
Thank you, Andrea. And we do have another question saying, why is there not a Colombian woman on this webinar? Well, I reached out, but unfortunately, we couldn't find a Colombian woman. And, you know, hopefully we will do another Latin America webinar and we can find women from other areas. We also reached out to Cuba. And again, it was difficult to find someone to speak. There's another question here also, which I think I'll direct to Flavia, about sanctions, because a lot of people do not actually understand the impact of sanctions. They think it's better than bombs, but the stats I have read from your countries on the sickness and death that's been caused by sanctions. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit more, Flavia.
Of course, yes, no. Yes, I was coming to that. Yes, well, sanctions are real, and I think Venezuelans, even the Venezuelan population, at the beginning, when they started hitting hard, which I think is after pandemia, they started hitting hard, well, 2017, but then also after pandemia was deepened the effect. Sanctions have several, you could say, angles to be looked at. You have sanctions that were imposed on personal people, like individuals. But then you have sanctions that have affected our ability as a country to transfer money outside. Under these so-called sanctions, our goal who was in the UK. They have been, during pandemic, we were not able to import vaccines. We were able to do it with China and also with the help of China, because sanctions bring along something called the overcompliance, which is any country or company would like to deal with a country who is under these so-called sanctions. So our oil sector is sanctioned. We can not sell. This changed in the last 2 years a little bit. There was some flexibility, but we are going back with Trump again to the era where it's difficult for us to trade our oil. You know, we are an oil producing country. It's make it almost impossible, but also the additives to make gasoline are sanctioned. So that was one of the deepest crisis the U.S. tried to bring on Venezuela in 2020 and 2021 when these kind of sanctions on our oil additives started. So the main thing was try to get the population on the streets, to get them angry at the government because we couldn't move cars because we didn't have enough gasoline. And there are women, I am sorry and I apologize, maybe I know the name, but I know there are 2 women in particular that have published books recently about the effect of sanctions on the children in Venezuela and on the health sector. Venezuela has been sanctioned more than 900 times. We have more than 900 sanctions upon us. Only Russia has more sanctions than us. And these sanctions has hurted the healthcare system because they have taken out the ability to continue with for instance, social programs we could do through CIDGO in the United States that help kids to get operations they couldn't get inside Venezuela. Operations they could get in the past in Argentina, and now they cannot. Surgeries related, kidney surgeries related, very difficult and complicated illnesses. And also the ability to import vaccines, because as I said at the beginning, no company wants to get out of the market just because you deal with Venezuela, even though the healthcare sector is not under sanction. It's more expensive for us to buy, it's twice the price. It's more difficult to find ships and people that want to bring the goods or import the goods to Venezuela, because we saw it with the oil tankers in the 2020. We were able to get additives for our gasoline from Iran. And here is, well, Mr. Alex Saab, who today is our Minister for Industry, played the role in this in silence and behind the scenes. He was able to strike a deal with Iran, paying in gold so they could help sending gasoline and additives for Venezuela. What the United States did, they were like pirates. They took the gasoline, they took some of the ships, they sanctioned the captains of these big ships. So it is a whole asymmetrical warfare, economical warfare, or all these new names we put in these new wars that are being bring upon the countries like Venezuela. And that's why they took Alex, because they knew, and they recognized the letter later in a book. Mike Pompeo published this book, and he recognized we needed to bring him down. We knew he was a diplomat, but he was the only one knowing the ways Venezuela circumvented sanctions, how they did it. So sanctions are very real. And every time the opposition that is outside Venezuela in its majority ask for sanctions, like lately, and I know Andreina can add better and more interesting details to what I'm saying, ask for sanctions again, like Maria Corina right now with Trump. People know we're gonna suffer in every way. I will cite a very brief example. Right now, a few days ago, Trump decided to revoke the license for Chevron, who was working here in Venezuela in the Orinoco Belt. And okay, he's saying, no, it will cut the money going to the government of Nicolas Maduro. No, but Chevron also has, for instance, social programs benefiting in education and health the communities nearby their own area of work. What is going on with those programs now? Is affecting directly the most needed. This is only related to Chevron as a company. So we cannot be blindsided to believe in the narrative of the US mainly, and sometimes the European Union also, who has imposed sanctions in the past, believing that sanctions are very targeted and they are focused and they will only hit one person, one sector. No. We are all connected. We are a society. It will affect us all, because money won't be available. Those kids will lose the benefits they had. Those workers will lose their work, and they are trying to bring the economy and the technology and all of the achievements of Venezuela back. They are trying to bring us down on our knees. They haven't been able to do it. They won't be able to do it. But what we have seen when we receive some investors in Venezuela, they say, oh, I am amazed. The conditions you have, the infrastructure you have, the professionals you have so prepared, they know it. How are you in these situations? And we always have to explain to them once again, well, it's because of sanctions that do not let us import spare parts to repair our subway, to repair our houses, our trucks, to bring fertilizer, all the tools we need for agriculture. All that is related at the end. So that is more or less what I can tell you about the effect of sanctions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Flavia. That was very, very useful. Colleen, I think Nicaragua is not under sanctions at the moment, although has been in the past. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and the relationship really with the US stroke NATO and your own government? You are muted. Oh, try the link next to it, because we've lost your visuals as well. Well, whilst Colleen is struggling with that, oh, here she's back.
No, Nicaragua is still under sanctions. For example, there hasn't been any development loans from like the World Bank or IDB since 2018, basically, cut off. Ironically, Nicaragua has been one of the, I think, probably best, quote, success stories as far as those programs. And the people that work in the World Bank, I think, are pretty ashamed, but since the United States controls all the decisions, so there's been no multilateral from IDB, the World Bank. Now they were attacking the Central America in Economic Integration Bank, got rid of the head of it, who was a Honduranian, because they said that he was, supporting dictatorships in Nicaragua. But but Besia is continuing to support, but not on the levels. So there have been other sanctions, but so far the country has been, it hasn't, because of the support of other countries, China, Russia, etc. The economy is not doing, has recovered from the coup attempts of 2018, recovered from the COVID, in fact, the COVID emergencies, despite all the the stuff that you'll read in the New York Times or the Washington Post or any other thing, the economy is doing actually quite well right now. So it's just seeing what's happening, and there's an effort now by the Puchos, or the counter-revolutionaries, to get Nicaragua out of CAFTA, the Central America Free Trade Agreement. But the relationship with some countries is difficult. Costa Rica, Venezuela, not Venezuela, Guatemala. But Central American countries come to each other's need. For example, during the crisis of COVID, Nicaragua was helping Honduras, getting people vaccinated, et cetera. When there was some droughts a couple of years ago, there were no droughts here because the water situation is much, much better. Nicaragua was supplying Central America with food, so Nicaragua has learned to respond to the sanctions and not let them, overtly destroy the economy. So it's
Yeah, thank you. Now, Alicia, you're not an especially political person, but I just thought I would ask you, Mexico is a neutral country, and I think it's very good that it's a neutral country. But of course, just like you wrote, Ukraine was a neutral country. There are pressures on these countries to deny their neutrality and to join NATO. Have you any news on that subject?
Well, currently we are right now in this moment where we want to avoid all, it's Trump is threatening to enter Mexico through the cartels to stop the fight with them. They want to enter the country with their military because of it. But at the moment, we have no news about it, all other than the arancels and everything that's going on. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Right, well, we can start to wrap up now. Ellen, do you have any questions or any summing up you would like to make? You're muted, Ellen.
I'd like to ask Alicia to do as she said she might be able to do about the party, because Mexico is the most strongest economic power in the South, the global South of our continent, our Western Hemisphere, next to Brazil. And I really feel that between the what is it, the ALBA and the CELAC, the two giant regional Latin American regional unities that come together to discuss Latin American problems, that this is really where it's at. That we talk about unity, and it's been beautifully presented today by Adriana, mentioning the importance of it, but it really, at this point, those of us in North America are going to have to pay attention to what the Latin American countries are doing. This is the reason we know so little about this giant global feminist leader, Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo. We don't pay attention enough to what they're doing. We can't do it for them. Of course, we can try to slow down what our country's trying to do against them, but we certainly have to pay attention to what they're doing. So I'm so grateful for this. Thank you, Pippa, for putting this on in UNAC and Global Women United. But I do want Alicia to tell us about the party that is somewhat responsible for like 85% of this Catholic country voting, a fifth of the voter population, voting for this Jewish scientist that is running the country and one of the most powerful leaders in the world today. But you don't have to be so superlative like I am, but I just wanted you to say something more about the Benistar program and the distribution, and just some of the nice changes that you feel or have been involved with. Just a few statements.
Yes. Well, first of all, the Morena Party was founded in 2011 as a civil association by the last president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and then became a political party in July 9, 2014. What the ideology of Morena is based upon social justice and anti-corruption. And at the beginning, it was looked down upon by the opposition, and many people in Mexico were against it because it's a party of the left. And Mexico is, with the relationships it has with the United States, it was seen as a threat to the economy. However, after many years, finally in 2018, Andrés Manuel López Obrador was elected as the president. And then it began what it's called the fourth transformation in Mexico, which is to ensure political policies of helping the poor people and the people that has less. And this is like the most the people that is often overlooked and not take into consideration when making the policies in Mexico. So when Andrés Manuel began his administration, he developed a lot of social programs. The Secretary of Welfare started doing a program which, as of now, is, I guess, the most popular program right now in Mexico, which is called the Pension for the Well-being of Older Adults, which provides financial support to senior citizens and from 65 to and old. And it gives a bi-monthly payment of 6,200 pesos, which is about $300 every 2 months. And I've seen firsthand how this program helped a lot of elder people to, who had no income, who were not able to work anymore for whatever reason. They are now given this help every 2 months. And I've seen how it changed a lot of lives. I've seen it because my two grandparents receive it too, and it's for everyone. It doesn't matter how your income or anything. You only have to be 65. And I've seen many families be helped with that income. Also, we have another program which is called Young People Building the Future, which it also gives financial help to young people who have no work. So what this program do is basically give the opportunity to young people to work either in a government office or in companies who are affiliated to the program, and they receive a payment, but they don't have to go through the normal process of entering a company, and no, they enter through the program, and so they receive an income, and they also learn and build their curriculum from there. And then we also right now have Claudia Sheinbaum as the president. I'm not going to say that these 6 years of Andrés Manuel López Obrador were the best 6 years of the country, because the opposition and the social media, and not social media, the medium class, it's not happy because they aren't receiving the help that the low class, let's say in Mexico, will be receiving. And many people were against Andrés López Obrador because he also started looking for corruption in the higher spheres of Mexico. And of course, it wasn't well received. But thankfully, the population in Mexico is really, really big. And the ones receiving the financial help and many women who are in tune with the ideology of the party, were united into. I'm sorry. My mom were a bit lost. What I wanted to say is that, in short, Mexican people realized that the best option was Morena Party and Claudia Sheinbaum. And I wanted to talk a bit about her because I think she is really making history. Claudia Sheinbaum studied physics at National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, with master's and PhD degrees in energy engineering. And she also worked as a researcher at the Institute of Engineering at UNAM for 20 years. And she then served as Secretary of the Environment when Andrés Manuel López Obrador was head of government of Mexico City. In 2015, she became head of the Tlalpan municipality. And in her short administration, Claudia already introduced the women's well-being pension, which Ellen talked about before, which provides also financial assistance to women aged 60 to 64. This will be seen as an extension to the pension for the well-being of older adults, but this is focused on women. And this is are already set to start. And she also launched the house-to-house health program, offering medical care to the elderly and people with disabilities. This also hasn't started like formally yet, but the people working at the Secretary of Welfare had already started to go house by house, asking each person about their medical status, and they will receive visits anytime they require it. And also in Mexico, we have the Social Security, which is an institute that gives free healthcare to everyone that it's working at an affiliated company or the government. You have two options, either the Social Security Institute or other Social Security Institute we have two. But many people who maybe are working with no official affiliation didn't have access to that healthcare. And since Andrés Manuel López Obrador started to work, his administration, he created this welfare social security. So if you don't have those two social securities healthcare, you can access through the Bienestar one, the welfare social one, which also gives free healthcare to people. So now that Claudia is launching this house-to-house health program, more and more people will be able to access free healthcare. And this is one of the reasons why she has 85% approval in all Mexico, because not only the elderly, but also the women are inspired by her, and the way she reacts to all these threats that by the international landscape and by Trump, which is the most recent talk about issue. And I'm sorry I cannot be as well
No,
lecture all of
Alicia,
you guys, but
Alicia, you're doing really, really well. And I think we probably have to wrap it up roundabout
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to say thank you so much, Ellen, for inviting me, and sorry for not being as well prepared as you guys, but I hope my little contribution was good for you, and thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it was so interesting. Now, just before we finish, any last comments? Flavia has apologized. She had to leave right now. And I think we've done most of the questions, if not all of them. So I'll ask Colleen if she'd like to make any closing remarks.
Nothing that occurs to me, but I think it's important for our organizations to work together, because united we stand, and and these type of exercises are very, very important to get us together, because it's the world is changing and we want it to go in the right direction. So we need to be there and not
And we need to, yeah, we need to understand each other's predicaments as well. In order to become closer. Understanding is very, very important, and this is partly what this is about. Okay, thank you so much, Colleen. I'm so glad you could join us. Andreina, do you have any closing remarks you would like to make?
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I agree with Colleen that it is so important to be able to listen to other women who we know are also fighting against imperialism and against capitalism. I hope this type of events happen more often, and that we can all contribute to a good distribution on social media. I think that's really important to try to make sure that these type of videos, events really go out there and people can listen to them. And thank you for hosting this, and I hope we can repeat it again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, all that really remains for me to say is to thank UNAC for hosting this. UNAC is the United National Anti-War Coalition for the United States. Thank you to all our panelists. You've been absolutely wonderful. I'm so happy that we could host this, and I hope this does promote more understanding across the world of each other's problems. And I hope also that we can help you resist NATO taking inroads into your countries and basically destroying them. So thank you again, everyone. I'll declare this finished now. This has been a wonderful webinar.
Ciao, ciao.